Our next speaker is unbelievably awesome. Speaking of which, Harriet Hall is our next talker, one of my absolute favorites. She's the SkepDoc. If you haven't read her column in Skeptic magazine, do that right now, because it's just amazing. She's a retired family physician, amongst other things. Her talk is called Enjoying Alternative Medicine. As a young person, she did not have a hiding place. Her favorite candy bar is a Three Musketeers, unless there's some Godiva chocolate available. Then she'll go for the Godiva chocolate. She prefers a shower. Her boat would be called the Healing Art. That was nice, and it has to be a sailboat. And the one question she would ask, which she actually has asked, but has not gotten an answer yet, and she's waiting, is on Amazon, there is a $24,000 healing pod that apparently you sit in this thing and it does something. And she wants to know, has anyone bought one? Apparently, there's no response to that. So please welcome the one and only Harriet Hall.
Some of you may be puzzled by my title, because you probably know I am not a fan of alternative medicine. And you probably think I ought to be talking about how to abolish it rather than enjoy it. But I do mean enjoying it, and I'll explain. But first, a disclaimer. There's no such thing as alternative medicine. There's only medicine that's been tested and proven to work, and medicine that hasn't. And once something has been tested and proven to work, we just call it medicine. But the term alternative medicine is a broad umbrella that shelters a whole variety of very different things. Chiropractic, homeopathy, all the way down to dietary supplements and herbal medicine and detoxification regimens, and the list goes on and on and on. And the things under this umbrella run the full gamut of plausibility and evidence. Some of them are more or less plausible, like herbal medicines. Some of them are implausible, like iridology, and some of them are impossible, like homeopathy. And the degree of evidence varies all over the board. Some of these things have been tested, and there's some evidence for them, but it tends to be conflicting evidence, and certainly not the quality of evidence that would be required to earn it a place in conventional medicine. Some of the things have never been tested. Some of them have been tested and proven not to work, but people keep using them anyway. And some of them are too silly to test. Scientists don't take them seriously enough to want to bother with them. So it doesn't make sense to lump all of these things together under one term. And alternative medicine is not a meaningful scientific or medical category. It's a marketing term. And it's deliberately designed to lend respectability to treatments that haven't earned it. There are other marketing terms like CAM, holistic medicine, integrative medicine, functional medicine. And these are all just marketing ploys to give people an excuse to use things that are improbable or untested or unproven. And this has allowed quackery to infiltrate some of our hospitals and medical schools. We call that quackademic medicine. You know, you might wonder why people would choose to use improbable and untested treatments. And basically, it's because they think they work. Most people are not critical thinkers. Evolution equipped our ancestors' brains with ways of thinking that gave them a survival advantage in a pre-scientific world. But those same ways of thinking have become a handicap in the modern world. We're impressed by stories, unduly impressed. We're so good at pattern recognition that we see patterns that aren't real, like the Virgin Mary on a grilled cheese sandwich. And we're not good at distinguishing correlation from causation. The post hoc ergo propter hoc error is the rooster crowed, the sun came up, therefore the rooster made the sun come up. And we laugh at that, but people say, I took a pill, I got better, therefore the pill made me better, which may or may not be true. It may just be another rooster. And we're good at making quick decisions, but that means we tend to jump to conclusions before we have all the facts. And our thinking is influenced by our emotions. You know, people are not thinking logically if they accept homeopathy and reject vaccines. And there are books and articles like these that provide a lot of insight into how our minds work and how we deceive ourselves. And I think the main reason that people use alternative medicine is that they think there's evidence. You know, good evidence to a medical scientist means randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled studies that are published in reputable, peer-reviewed medical journals and preferably have been replicated. But good evidence means something very different to the general public. They're satisfied if there's a sciencey explanation that sounds more or less plausible, if people with titles and letters after their names say it works, if someone says there are studies that support it, which may or may not be true, if there are a lot of testimonials, and if it worked for someone they know. If your grandmother swears that homeopathy cured her arthritis, that's all the evidence that most people think they need. Now, why are some of us skeptics and critical thinkers and other people not? It's because critical thinking and science are hard. They don't come naturally. They have to be learned, and it seems not everyone can learn. Now, you take two people who believe in dowsing, and you explain to them how the ideomotor illusion fools people, and you tell them about all the tests that have been done and how dowsing has failed miserably. And one person will say, "Oh, I guess it doesn't work. I was wrong. Thank you." Another person will say, "Whatever, you're not going to change my mind. I know it works because I've seen it work." Now, why do people react so differently? What makes some of us skeptics? Well, I asked Ray Hyman that question, and his theory is that skeptics are mutants. He says, seriously, he thinks something has evolved in some of our brains that makes it easier for us to learn to overcome our default thinking patterns. And I think Ray is correct. Skeptics are mutants. And as evidence, here's a picture of my three-legged daughter. So because of the way the human mind works, we're stuck with alternative medicine. It's going to be with us as long as humans have human nature. So we might as well try to enjoy it. And I mean that in two senses. The patients can enjoy the treatments, and skeptics can enjoy the claims. Now, Voltaire said that the art of medicine consists in amusing the patient while nature cures the disease. And many illnesses are self-limited, and symptoms fluctuate. A patient with arthritis will have a lot of pain one day and maybe not much pain the next day. Placebos make people feel better, and distraction helps, and patients are satisfied if they can feel that they're doing something. And so ineffective treatments don't cure, but they can entertain. And we all know this, and that's why we kiss our children's boo-boos. And skeptics can get a lot of enjoyment out of reading some of the ridiculous claims made by alternative medicine, and we can celebrate the creativity that goes into them. I started writing about alternative medicine because I thought it was funny and entertaining. And I enjoy reading ridiculous claims and pseudoscientific mumbo-jumbo. When I encounter a particularly ridiculous claim, I think, you couldn't make this stuff up. But obviously somebody did make this stuff up. And really, alternative medicine is a tribute to the inexhaustible ingenuity, imagination, and inventiveness of the human mind. And the creativity that leads to silly alternative medicine stories is the same creativity that we appreciate in science fiction, fantasy, novels, the movies, artistic accomplishments. And the kind of original thinking that leads to alternative medicine can contribute to scientific discoveries. And in some cases, alternative medicine has built whole elaborate systems of interlocking ideas that have impressive internal coherence, and they just don't happen to correspond to anything in the real world. But that's quite an accomplishment to build a house of cards like that. So in all of these areas of endeavor, we can celebrate the creativity without believing that the creation itself is real. Now, I love the Harry Potter books, but I know Hogwarts isn't real. So when we hear a ridiculous claim, we're tempted to say, how could anyone possibly believe that? You'd have to be stupid or crazy. But people are not stupid or crazy. They're just doing what comes naturally. And, you know, we should be kind to the handicapped. And seriously, people who believe weird things are handicapped by a poor understanding of science and a lack of training in critical thinking skills. So we shouldn't blame the person, but it's still okay to laugh at the claim. If something's funny, it's natural to laugh. Every issue of Michael Shermer's Skeptic magazine runs this quotation from Spinoza. I've made a ceaseless effort not to ridicule, not to bewail, not to scorn human actions, but to understand them. But, you know, sometimes some of the proponents of alternative medicine are quacks and snake oil salesmen, and they don't believe in the treatments. They're just trying to defraud naive people. I think they're deserving of all the ridicule and scorn we can possibly heap on them. But we mustn't really ridicule the well-meaning people who believe in nonsense, because it's not their fault. They're only thinking like normal humans. But there are a lot of things in alternative medicine that are just plain funny, and I want to tell you about some of my favorites. I heard a magnetic mattress pad salesman give a talk. He explained that the negative magnetism is greater at night because the moon is out. And the positive magnetism, of course, is greater during the day because the sun is out. Now, is there any possible reaction to that other than laughter? I mean, you can't talk to people like that. And vitamin O was one of the first things I ran across, and it's still one of the funniest. I got an advertising brochure in the mail, and it portrayed vitamin O as this miracle cure that would work for almost everything that can possibly ail a person. And the O stands for oxygen. This is an oxygen supplement. And it comes in a little bitty bottle with an eyedropper. Now, you can imagine any oxygen that might be in a few drops of liquid from an eyedropper, it's just negligible in comparison with the amount of oxygen that we breathe into our lungs. And, you know, fish have gills. They're equipped to extract oxygen from the water that they swim in, but humans don't have gills. So I was already laughing. But then came something that just left me rolling on the floor. They tested it, and they found that it didn't contain oxygen. And you wonder, why on earth would they admit this in their advertising brochure? Well, they didn't mind admitting it because they explained it away. They said it was too much for the lab to measure. You see, the lab could only measure up to 40 parts per million. And vitamin O had so much more that the lab registered it as 0. Now, I don't think that's how that works. And so I had to wonder what universe these people live in, because in my universe, if you pour a pitcher of water into a glass, the glass fills up and overflows. And apparently in their universe, the glass stays empty and dry. So they really wanted to prove that there was really oxygen in vitamin O, despite what the lab said. And they thought they could prove it indirectly with a clinical study where they would give vitamin O to people and show that their blood oxygen levels rose. And they hired a medical anthropologist, of all people, to do this clinical trial. And he was an idiot. He didn't know what he was doing. And the study he got had results that were just physiologically impossible. There were so many things wrong with his results that I'm convinced to this day that this experiment was never actually done. I think someone sat at a desk and made up the numbers, because there's no way it could have actually gone the way it was written up. But, you know, that was all they needed. They didn't care whether it was true or not. They just wanted to be able to say, we have a clinical study, so they could sell more vitamin O. I thought this whole thing was so ridiculous that I wrote a funny article for Skeptical Inquirer entitled, "Oxygen is Good Even When It's Not There." And that sort of launched my career as a skeptical writer, so I guess you could say I owe a lot to vitamin O. railroad therapy. You may not have heard of railroad therapy. I don't think it spread much beyond Indonesia. This got started when an old man had had a stroke and he was still partially paralyzed and he felt like life wasn't worth living. So he went to commit suicide by train and lay down on the tracks. But before the train came, he realized he was feeling better. And he decided he was cured and he got up and went home. So patients imitated him. They go and lie down with their head on one rail and their legs on the other. And it's supposed to help with everything, high blood pressure, diabetes, you name it. I'll say one thing for railroad therapy. At least it gets some of the patients out of bed and out of the house. This is the Chacrys Mini. It's a 12-sided Fogel crystal in an attractive wooden handle. It provides all the beneficial effects of a crystal bed. That's assuming that a crystal bed has effects, which I doubt. But this can transmit the 7 colors of the chakras. It can be used with all chakras, meridians, and reflex points. It creates harmony between the body and soul. It opens energy channels through which we can fill up with positive energy. And you can buy this for a mere 890 euros. Have you ever heard of Tong? It's hilarious. Tong is alleged to heal all kinds of conditions, including cancer, injuries, heart problems, depression, hormone imbalance, grief, and it helps with weight loss. It works by removing blockages in the physical and energy body. And I think of it as a combination of acupuncture and voodoo. If you want to laugh at the gullibility of humans, just Google for a video of Tong. You'll see a whole room full of presumably sane adults standing there tapping on these little acupuncture dolls rhythmically in unison, the whole room full of people tapping together with these little magnetic hammers. And they say some patients are healed in a single treatment. Some require more than one treatment. Some of them only get partial relief. And some of them don't benefit at all. I think maybe that's because they're laughing too hard. Koren specific technique is another funny thing. The chiropractor waves his hands around the patient's head to figure out what's wrong in the body. And then he uses this little instrument that goes rat-a-tat-tat on the appropriate spot. They even have couples therapy. There's a video that shows a married couple standing face to face, maybe a foot apart. And behind each of them is a chiropractor going rat-a-tat-tat in the same place on both of their backs. Now, this is used to locate areas that need attention, such as meridians, acupuncture points, trigger points, energy cysts, emotional issues, allergies, phobias, addictions, bad habits, toxicity, structural imbalances, visceral stresses, you name it. And the chiropractors learn to do this in a home study course or a seminar. And it says they learn exactly where to treat, and you can't overcorrect. Now that part I believe. This is the device. It produces 12 pulses a second. And that's because that frequency is the low beta somatomotor rhythm, whatever the heck that's supposed to be. And then a large percentage of American chiropractors use a bogus muscle testing technique called applied kinesiology. Some of them use it to diagnose allergies. I went to a talk that a chiropractor gave, and he explained how he would take a sealed glass vial with an allergen in it, and the patient would hold that vial in one hand while the chiropractor would test the strength in the opposite arm. And if he thought that the patient was weaker when they were holding the glass vial of allergen, that meant they were allergic to what was in the vial. And he said he had one patient that he thought was allergic to something in the workplace. The patient worked at Boeing, and he said, I didn't have a vial of Boeing, so I asked the patient to just think about Boeing, and that worked just as well. Now, in the picture, this chiropractor is diagnosing this little girl by testing the strength in her mother's arm. And then this is Praha Johnny. He's 83 years old, and he hasn't had anything to eat for 7 decades. He's a breatharian. He lives off of universal life force energy. And the Indian doctors are studying him, trying to figure out how he does it, but they're not providing 24/7 surveillance because this is a nice old guy. He wouldn't lie or sneak food, would he? Well, there are manuals on how to live on air like he's doing, and people all over the world have tried it, and some of them have died of starvation, but most of them have gone back to eating. You've heard, you know what acupuncture is. Well, this is ear acupuncture, and it's not ancient Chinese anything. It was invented in the 1950s by a French doctor who imagined that the ear looked sort of like a fetus curled up in its mother's womb. So he assigned points on the imaginary fetus and labeled them for all different parts of the body. This is the kind of acupuncture that's being taught to our American military doctors as battlefield acupuncture. Now, of course, there are no anatomical connections between the ear and any of these parts of the body. And there are similar diagrams for foot reflexology and for iridology. Spots on the iris are supposed to represent different organs in different parts of the body. And there's a diagram for hand acupuncture. There's a totally different diagram for hand reflexology. Notice the spine along the outside of the thumb, the arms on the index finger, the eyes on the middle finger, and the heart at the tip of the pinky. Again, no anatomical connections. Teeth even have organs assigned to them. And as a joke, one doctor invented butt reflexology. Now, he submitted a proposal to talk at an integrative medicine conference, and they invited him to come and speak about his wonderful new method. And he had to admit to them that it was just a joke. They couldn't tell because the other people that were speaking at their conference were speaking about just as ridiculous things. So he published a story of his hoax in the British Medical Journal. This is Adam Dream Healer. Now, when Adam was 15, he started manifesting bizarre powers like telekinesis. Pencils would fly into his hand. Of course, nobody else ever saw that happen. And then he had a dream, and the dream told him to go to a specific island off the coast of British Columbia to meet a large black bird. And he did. And the bird locked eyes with Adam and imparted to him complex scientific information about the universe. His parents were so impressed they took a picture of the bird. Now, I ask you, does this look like a supernatural quantum mechanics instructor or maybe just a random crow? Well, with Adam's new bird brain knowledge, he found that he could go into a trance and he could heal people. And by the age of 19, he was making $1 million a year. He healed the astronaut Edgar Mitchell at a distance of 2,700 miles. Now, Mitchell has a very open mind. He spent the last 30 years exploring the science of the paranormal. Mitchell had an MRI scan that showed an incidental finding of some type of an irregularity on one kidney. And the doctors didn't know what it was, and they wanted to do a biopsy. But he refused the biopsy, and he asked Adam to heal it. Well, Adam was in British Columbia, and Mitchell was in Florida. And he was convinced that he had kidney cancer. His mind was made up, so he had Adam cure him of cancer. And sure enough, on a follow-up MRI scan, that irregularity had vanished. Now, it seems to me it's far more likely that it was some kind of an imaging artifact than that Adam Dream Healer healed him from 2,700 miles away. But Mitchell believes he was healed. And then there's therapeutic touch. Now, I used to think that therapeutic touch was a misnomer because the nurses who do this don't touch the patient. They move their hands around the patient's body. And I found out that they were actually touching something they thought. They thought they were touching the human energy field, and I guess they were smoothing out wrinkles in it or something. Well, when Emily Rosa was 9 years old, she did an experiment for a school science fair project. She recruited a bunch of nurses that did therapeutic touch, and she held her hand over their hand and asked if they could sense her human energy field. And of course they all could. But then she devised this screen so that they couldn't see whether her hand was there or not. And suddenly their ability vanished. They couldn't guess any better than chance. You know, this is a little bit like the story of the Emperor's New Clothes, where it took a child to show that the adults were deluding themselves. But it didn't stop the therapeutic touch practitioners from doing what they do. Ear candles. Who was the first person to put a lighted candle in his ear, and what on earth was he thinking? The idea is this is a hollow candle, and it supposedly creates a vacuum that sucks the earwax out of your ear. And they open it up afterwards and show you all the wax. But it's not wax. Skeptics were smart enough to try lighting the candle and not putting it in the ear. And when they opened those candles up, saw the same thing. It's just debris from the candle burning. Now, some ear candlers have stopped claiming that it removes earwax, but they still say it's a holistic treatment for earaches, and it's a relaxation aid and a bunch of other things. But ear candles have been banned by the FDA. They serve no medical purpose, and they're risky. There have been reports of burns and perforated eardrums, and even one death where they started a house fire. You may have seen these detox foot baths. You sit there for a while and the water turns brown, and they tell you that's all the toxins that have come out of your body through the skin of your feet. There's no such thing. It's rust that came off the electrodes by a process of electrolysis. And you get the same color if you don't put feet in the water. You might have to add a pinch of salt, but I think you should take this whole thing with a pinch of salt. And I'm sure you've heard of those power balance bracelets. They feature holograms that are based on Eastern philosophy. And they have frequencies that react with the body's natural energy field to improve your balance and strength and flexibility. And they have spectacularly failed testing. And these are even sillier. These are Ancestor Bands. They're embedded with frequencies that connect you to your ancestors in the afterlife so that your ancestors can advise you and heal you. People buy these things. Another embedded frequency product is amino neurofrequency. These are little stick-on patches. And they supposedly contain stored subharmonic signals programmed to a specific frequency that provides the biofield with information via sympathetic resonance. And your body recognizes which targeted result the patch is suggesting. And the connection from the patch to the body is made through the nervous system and the 7 layers of bioenergy the body activity produces. Now, you can't buy these. They're only sold to chiropractors who've taken the course to learn how to use them. And the chiropractors use this in connection with spinal manipulation therapy. So I guess they don't work by themselves. You have to crack their backs too. And this is an old one. These are Perkins Tractors. These were 2 3-inch rods with a pointed tip. One was brass and the other one was steel. And they would stroke these over the area of pain to draw off the noxious electrical fluid. Now, this sort of made sense at the time because electricity was new and mysterious and people were impressed. And George Washington bought a set of these. And finally, somebody thought to make a set of placebo tractors. He made them out of wood and painted them to look like the real thing, and they worked every bit as well. And this is what George was mentioning. You could never guess what this is called. It is a sweat evaporating sauna, healthy urn, nano ion, negative ion, far infrared ray, hyperthermia, fumigate, pulse magnetic field, purple clay, underglaze pastel, and yellow glaze lotus out of clear water. It's a mouthful. They sell for $24,600 on Amazon. There's a little door. You open it. You get inside. You sit there. You add water and Chinese herbs, and you connect it to 220-volt electricity. And it is a perfect fusion of 5 therapies: anion therapy, fumigating therapy, hyperthermia therapy, far infrared rays therapy, and pulsed magnetic circulating field therapy. And it's effective for over 30 diseases. It has health rock gemstone that releases nanoions, far infrared rays, and pulsed magnetic field with 0 radioactivity. Best of all, it dredges the 3rd expelling channel. Yeah. I wrote Amazon and I said, is this for real? And if it is, have you ever sold one? And they didn't answer me, so I really would like to know. And I know if they want to sell more of them, they need to shorten the name. So I thought, you know, this looks like the amphoras that the ancient Greeks used to use to store their wine. And this is a cam thing, so maybe they should call it a camphora. And they could also call it health in a jar, but I think it would probably be more honest to just call it a crock. Now, with craniosacral therapy, you can see the sutures between the bones of the skull. They're very wiggly and they're totally interlocked. And craniosacral therapists use their hands to move the bones relative to each other. And they say that this, they can adjust the craniosacral rhythms of the spinal fluid. Well, newsflash, the bones cannot be moved, and there's no such thing as rhythms of the spinal fluid. Dolphin therapy. The patient gets into a pool with a dolphin and a therapist. The therapist touches the dolphin, and the patient touches the therapist. And somehow the therapist acts as a conduit for the healing energy to pass from the dolphin to the patient. And there's urine therapy. Morarji Desai was a former prime minister of India, and he drinks his own urine. He was interviewed about it on American television by Dan Rather. And the British actress Sarah Miles has been drinking her own urine for 30 years now. She says it immunizes you against allergies and has all kinds of other health benefits. But in my humble opinion, this is a piss-poor remedy. And if you think urine tastes bad, how about turpentine? There's a doctor that says turpentine will cure almost everything, and it's even a fountain of youth. And you wonder how she got that idea. Well, she got it in her head that our primitive ancestors had some kind of a miracle cure-all that we'd forgotten about. So she started asking all of her African-American patients if she remembered their grandparents ever talking about anything that their slave ancestors had done. And some of them remembered yearly dosing with turpentine and sugar. So she tried it for herself. And she said, I think my IQ went up like 50 points. I could just feel it, all this mental energy and understanding and clarity, just like when I was 10 years old. Everything was very clear and focused. I said, wow, what a feeling. I did some math problems. I said, this is pretty good. Now, this is before the turpentine would even have had a chance to get absorbed into her body. And she knew that sometimes turpentine had caused seizures, so she wondered what the safe dose was. And to figure it out, she kept increasing the dose little by little until she felt a little tingling or a little twitch. So she decided everything up to that dose was safe. And then she wondered if it would be safe to keep taking it every day. So she took it every day for a week and didn't notice any problems. And she said, I decided that was long enough for the purposes of science. Boy, I wish somebody would tell the FDA that all Big Pharma has to do to get a new drug approved is to have one person take the new drug for a week and say, I didn't notice any problems. That would sure lower the price of drugs. Maybe we should try it. And so she started giving it to people willy-nilly. She ended up treating all of her patients in her medical office with this. Now, this doctor was an Ivy League trained doctor who ought to have known better. But pretty soon, when a patient came in with pneumonia, instead of giving the patient antibiotics or sending them to the hospital, she'd just send them home with turpentine. And she lost her license, not because of the turpentine, but on a technicality. And she's now in Panama, and she's still pushing turpentine in what she calls holistic mentoring consultations over the phone or Skype or whatever. The whole field of homeopathy is totally ridiculous. The principles are like cures like, and less is better. And I like to explain the theory of homeopathy with the example of coffee. If coffee keeps you awake, that means that dilute coffee will put you to sleep. The more dilute it is, the faster it'll put you to sleep. And if you keep diluting it until there isn't a single molecule of coffee left, and then you drip the solution onto a sugar pill and let it evaporate, the sugar pill will remember the water that will remember the coffee, and it will be a strong sleeping pill. And this is a very popular homeopathic product that is nonsense on stilts. This is a dilution of something that never existed in the first place. A doctor in France was looking at tissue samples of flu victims in the 1918 flu epidemic. And he imagined that he saw a little vibrating something. He thought it was an oscillating bacteria, so he called it Oscillococcus. Nobody else ever saw it. He convinced himself he could also see it in a sample of duck liver, so this has become a remedy for flu. And this is the back of the package. It's too small to read, but I'll tell you, it says the active ingredient is Anise barbariae, 200 ckHPUS. Now, the average consumer wouldn't have the foggiest idea what that meant, but I know, and I will translate. Whoops, went the wrong way. Anise barbariae is the scientific name of the Muscovy duck. And actually, they just use a little bit of the heart and liver of the duck. 200C means that they have diluted it in a proportion of 1 to 100, and then they've taken that dilution and diluted it in 1 to 100, and they've kept doing that 200 times. And by about the 23rd dilution, there isn't a single molecule of duck left. And by the time you've done it 200 times, the duck is history. All that remains is the quack. The K just refers to a specific method of dilution, and HPUS means that it's listed in the official homeopathic pharmacopoeia of the United States. Now, the FTC has new labeling requirements. They want homeopathic products to say on the label that there's no scientific evidence backing homeopathic claims, and that the claims are based only on theories from the 1700s that are not accepted by modern medical experts. That's a step in the right direction, but I want them to put this on the label. Contains no active ingredient, for entertainment purposes only. And then there's the no-touch chiropractor. This is a chiropractor who lives just north of Seattle. And they filmed her for a TV news show. And it showed her treating the patients by holding her hands together and cracking her wrist, making a cracking sound in her own wrist while she was 2 or 3 inches away from the patient. And they showed her the videotape of what she'd done. And they said, "Look, you're not touching the patient." And she said, "Well, my whole thing is that I'm touching." And I reported her to the authorities, and nothing happened. They're selling raw water now for essentially $24 a gallon. This is unfiltered, untreated, unsterilized spring water. Nothing's been done to remove bacteria, viruses, or parasites like Giardia. And there's cupping. You may remember Michael Phelps sporting some of these bruises from the Olympics. The cup produces a vacuum, and it sucks up the skin into the cup, and it leaves this unsightly bruise. There's a new, gentler form of cupping with these little silicone soft cups that they even use on the face, and supposedly this doesn't cause any bruising. And then there's gua sha, where they scrape the skin and they leave these marks. Now, it seems to me that this is more like assault and battery than medical treatment. But I've saved my favorite one for the last. This is Bratso the Gazer. He's this good-looking, long-haired Croatian man that comes out on stage and stands there and gazes at the audience for 5 to 10 minutes. Doesn't say a word, doesn't move, just stands there and gazes. And at least he doesn't make any claims for himself, He doesn't need to, because his supporters say how they can feel energy, and they feel relaxed, they see an aura, and they experience peace or relief from pain. And they claim to have been miraculously cured of everything from migraine to cancer. And this guy is making big bucks by standing there doing absolutely nothing. Wouldn't you love to have a job like that? His supporters claim that just looking at his picture is sufficient for healing. So, behold and be healed. Just look at those soulful eyes. Can't you just feel the vibrations? So, I'd like to encourage you to look at the claims and these elaborate belief systems in alternative medicine as fiction and as manifestations of the inexhaustible creativity and inventiveness of the human mind. And we can enjoy the humor and appreciate the creativity without believing the false claims. And when something's funny, it's perfectly okay to laugh. One of the commenters on our website said people have two great skills. One, to make something up, and two, to believe it's true. It takes a lot of work to overcome these skills. And whether or not they can overcome those skills, we skeptics can use our own skills to appreciate the ingenuity while rejecting the beliefs. But don't ever forget that silliness kills. Alternative medicine can kill directly. For instance, when Chinese herbs have led to liver failure and liver cancer, or when chiropractors have killed patients with a stroke by manipulating their necks. But more often it kills indirectly by persuading people to reject or delay legitimate medical treatment that might have saved their lives. So, and you know, the alternative cancer treatments are the worst of all, because people waste their time with alternative treatments, and by the time they realize it's not working and they go back to a real doctor, it's too late for the treatments to work. So it's okay to laugh. You know, I searched for a picture to illustrate laughter, and this one popped right up, and I didn't find a picture of President Trump laughing. I think it's because he doesn't laugh, he just gets laughed at. Anyway, they say laughter is the best medicine, and some people even think there's evidence that laughter might prolong your life. And I don't think I believe that, but I do think that laughing feels good and makes life more enjoyable. So, enjoy.
Harriet Hall, ladies and gentlemen, Harriet Hall.
Congratulations. Thank you. Thank you.